I never imagined my wedding day would be the beginning of my greatest nightmare. The moment I walked down the aisle, glowing in my carefully chosen white gown, I thought I was stepping into a fairy tale. But fairy tales, as I soon learned, are only stories. Reality is far more cruel. My husband, Ethan, had always been charming. His smile could light up a room, and his words carried a warmth that made you feel like you were the center of the universe. That's what drew me to him in the first place. But standing there at the altar, I couldn't shake the icy glances from his mother, Vivian, and his older sister, Lila. They sat in the front row, whispering to each other as if sharing some inside joke. My stomach twisted. I brushed it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. The reception was lavish, Vivian's doing, of course. She loved to flaunt her wealth and influence. As I greeted the guests, I noticed how Vivian's friends looked me up and down, their smiles polite but their eyes sharp, assessing. "She's lovely," one woman said to Vivian, loud enough for me to hear, "but she's simple, isn't she?" Vivian's response was a laugh that sent shivers down my spine. Yes, well, not everyone can be extraordinary. I clenched my fists, determined to ignore the sting. This was my wedding day. I refused to let her ruin it. But the real blow came later that night during the first dance. Ethan's family had gathered around, clapping and cheering, but their smiles were laced with mockery. As Ethan twirled me under the lights, I overheard Lila whisper to a cousin, "She doesn't belong here. She's out of her depth." The words pierced me like a knife. My dream day was unraveling. When Ethan and I finally escaped to our hotel suite, I confronted him. "Your family, they don't like me, do they?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Don't let them get to you, Kate. They're just protective." Protective? They were mocking me, Ethan. Right there in front of everyone. He kissed my forehead, his tone dismissive. "You're overthinking it. Let's just enjoy tonight." But I couldn't enjoy it. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they would only grow in the weeks to come. Married life with Ethan was a mix of bliss and bitterness. He was sweet when we were alone, but when his family was around, he transformed into someone else entirely. Vivian's subtle jabs became a daily occurrence, always wrapped in a guise of concern. "Kate, dear," she said one evening during a family dinner, "have you thought about taking etiquette classes? It's just, well, our circles can be quite demanding, and I wouldn't want you to feel out of place." Lila smirked over her glass of wine. "Oh, Mother, don't overwhelm her. She's doing her best, after all." I looked to Ethan for support, but he only gave me a strained smile, his eyes darting away. The breaking point came during a charity gala. Vivian had insisted I attend, even though I felt like a fish out of water among the glittering gowns and polished smiles. As I stood awkwardly by the bar, I overheard Vivian speaking to a group of donors. "She's sweet," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "but honestly, I expected Ethan to choose someone more refined." Laughter erupted from the group, and my face burned with humiliation. When I confronted Ethan that night, his response was infuriating. "They don't mean anything by it," he said, brushing off my tears. "You're taking it too personally." Despite everything, I tried to fit in. I took Vivian's advice, attending etiquette classes and investing in designer clothes, hoping to earn their approval. But nothing was ever enough. Every effort I made was met with more criticism. One evening, as I sat alone in our apartment, staring at a photo from our honeymoon, something inside me snapped. Why was I bending over backward for people who clearly despised me? Why wasn't Ethan standing up for me? I realized then that I couldn't keep living like this. If they wanted a fight, I would give them one. From that moment of realization, my resolve hardened. I wasn't going to let Vivian, Lila, or anyone else in Ethan's family dictate how I lived my life, or how I felt about myself. If they wanted me to fail, I would give them the fight of their lives. But I quickly learned that standing up to them would come with devastating consequences. My first act of defiance was at a family brunch Vivian hosted at her sprawling estate. The theme was old Hollywood glamour, and I arrived dressed to the nines in a sleek black gown with vintage pearls, channeling Audrey Hepburn. When I walked through the door, all heads turned, and for a moment, I thought I'd won a small victory. Vivian's smile was tight. "Oh, Kate, You made it. I wasn't sure you'd understand the theme. I returned her smile, equally icy. I never miss an opportunity to shine. Lila snorted into her mimosa, but I ignored her. As the brunch progressed, I held my ground, participating in conversations with poise and confidence. I could see their discomfort, Vivian's forced laughter, Lila's exaggerated eye rolls, but I felt empowered for the first time. Until, of course, they retaliated. After the meal, Vivian pulled me aside, her tone sweet but her words venomous. I know you're trying, dear, but perhaps it's best to let the more seasoned women handle the social dynamics. You wouldn't want to embarrass yourself, or Ethan. Her words stung, but I didn't let her see it. Thank you for the advice, Vivian, I said, my voice steady. But I think I'll manage just fine. The conflict with Vivian and Lila wasn't just between us, it seeped into my marriage. Ethan hated confrontation, and instead of supporting me, he retreated into silence. One night, after another heated dinner with his family, I confronted him. Why won't you say anything to them? I demanded, pacing our living room. They humiliate me, Ethan. In front of you, in front of everyone, and you just sit there, he sighed, rubbing his temples. What do you want me to do, Kate? They're my family, and what am I? I shot back, my voice cracking. Am I not your family too? His silence was deafening. It became clear that I was on my own. Things escalated at Ethan's company gala, an event I had been dreading but couldn't avoid. Vivian and Lila were, of course, in attendance, along with the elite of the business world. I had meticulously prepared, wearing an elegant emerald gown and practicing conversation starters to hold my own. For most of the evening, I managed to avoid them. But as I stood by the buffet, chatting with one of Ethan's colleagues, I heard a familiar voice. She's charming, isn't she? Vivian's tone was syrupy sweet, but her words were daggers. It's just a shame she doesn't quite understand our world. Poor thing, she's trying so hard, Lila chimed in, her laughter sharp. It's like watching a child play dress-up. My heart sank as I realized they were talking about me. Worse, the colleague I was speaking to excused himself awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with the spectacle Vivian and Lila were making. I couldn't take it anymore. Turning on my heel, I marched straight to their table. Is there something you'd like to say to me directly? I demanded, my voice trembling but firm. The room fell silent. Vivian looked up at me with feigned surprise. Kate, dear, what are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, my hands clenched. You've been undermining me since the day I married Ethan. I'm done pretending it doesn't bother me. Lila smirked. Oh, sweetie, don't take things so personally. It's all in good fun. Fun? I echoed, my voice rising. Tearing someone down for your own amusement is fun to you? Before they could respond, I turned to Ethan, who had been standing frozen by the bar. And you, I said, my voice breaking, are you really going to just stand there and let this happen? He looked at me helplessly, his silence cutting deeper than any insult Vivian or Lila could throw. Humiliated and furious, I left the gala, ignoring Ethan's weak protests as I stormed out. The weeks that followed were a blur of arguments and cold shoulders. Ethan tried to apologize, but his words felt hollow. The rift between us widened with each passing day. One evening, as I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, a headline caught my eye: Family feud at high society gala, daughter-in-law causes scene. My heart sank as I read the article, complete with quotes from anonymous attendees describing me as overly emotional and out of place. It didn't take a genius to figure out who had leaked the story. Furious, I confronted Ethan. Your family has crossed a line, I said, shoving the article in his face. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? He looked at the article and sighed. Kate, you shouldn't have confronted them like that. You know how they are. I stared at him, incredulous. You're blaming me? They humiliated me, Ethan, publicly, and now they're spreading lies about me to the media. I'll talk to them, he said weakly, but I knew he wouldn't. For the first time, I started to wonder if I had made a mistake marrying him. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, an unexpected lifeline appeared in the form of Ethan's younger brother, Adam. Unlike the rest of the family, Adam had always been kind to me, but he mostly kept to himself, avoiding the drama that surrounded Vivian and Lila. One afternoon, he called me out of the blue. I heard about the gala, he said, his voice sympathetic. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how they treated you. It's not right. His words brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, Adam, that means more than you know. You don't deserve this, Kate, he continued, and you're not alone. If there's anything I can do, just let me know. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. In the weeks that followed, Adam's words lingered in my mind. I had been so consumed by Vivian and Lila's hostility, by Ethan's passivity, that I hadn't considered I might have allies, even within their family. That small spark of hope was enough to keep me going, though I wasn't sure where it would lead. It started with a conversation I didn't realize I needed. Adam invited me for coffee, a rare gesture that I accepted with hesitation. We met at a cozy cafe on the edge of town, far removed from the world of high society luncheons and gala drama. I don't get it, I admitted after we'd exchanged pleasantries. Why are you sticking your neck out for me? You're Vivian's son too. Adam stirred his coffee thoughtfully. You're right, I am, but I'm also tired of seeing her treat people like pawns in her game. You're not the first person she's tried to tear down, but you're the first one who stood up to her. His words both comforted and unsettled me. I don't feel like I'm standing up to her. Most days, it feels like I'm barely holding on. That's because you're fighting alone, he said simply. You shouldn't have to. Adam's support emboldened me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Together, we began to strategize ways to reclaim my dignity and stand up to Vivian and Lila. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about drawing boundaries and demanding respect. You can't play their game, Adam advised during one of our many conversations. They'll always have the upper hand, but you can change the rules. How? I asked, skeptical but intrigued. By showing them they can't control you. Start by building your own network, your own reputation. Show them, and Ethan, that you don't need their approval. It was a daunting idea, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I had been so focused on fitting into their world that I had lost sight of my own strengths. It was time to change that. The first step was reconnecting with who I was before I met Ethan. I dusted off my old portfolio and began freelancing as a graphic designer, a career I had put on hold after our wedding. Slowly but surely, I rebuilt my confidence, landing a few small but meaningful clients. Vivian and Lila, of course, caught wind of my efforts and wasted no time belittling them. Oh, how quaint, Lila remarked at a dinner party. A little hobby to keep you busy. I smiled sweetly, refusing to take the bait. Actually, it's a full-time career, and it's going quite well. Thank you. Their barbs didn't sting as much anymore. I was learning to see them for what they were, insecure, manipulative women who thrived on making others feel small. But the real turning point came during yet another family gathering, a charity event Vivian was hosting at her estate. Adam had encouraged me to attend, not to prove anything to them but to myself. The evening started predictably enough, with Vivian and Lila playing their usual games of thinly veiled insults and backhanded compliments. But things escalated when Vivian, in a theatrical show of generosity, announced a sizable donation to the charity on behalf of the entire family. She then turned to me with a saccharine smile. Kate, dear, would you like to say a few words on behalf of Ethan and yourself? It was a trap, and I knew it. If I declined, I'd look ungrateful. If I accepted, I'd be stepping into her spotlight. But this time, I was ready. I took the microphone, my heart pounding but my voice steady. Thank you, Vivian, for your generous donation. I began. It's truly inspiring to see such support for a cause so close to my heart. I paused, meeting her gaze. In fact, Ethan and I have also made a contribution, one that reflects our personal values and priorities. Because at the end of the day, what truly matters is not just the size of the donation, but the sincerity behind it. The room erupted in polite applause, but the look on Vivian's face was priceless. For the first time, I had outmaneuvered her on her own turf. After the event, Ethan pulled me aside, his expression unreadable. Where did that come from? He asked, not unkindly. What do you mean? I replied, feigning innocence. You were so composed. Confident. It's not like you. I bristled at his words, but chose to see the silver lining. Maybe it's who I've always been, Ethan. You just haven't noticed. To my surprise, he didn't argue. Instead, he seemed thoughtful, almost introspective. It was the first time in months I felt like he was truly seeing me. In the days following the event, I continued to focus on my work and personal growth, refusing to let Vivian and Lila's antics consume me. Adam remained a steadfast ally, offering encouragement and advice when I needed it most. But the real breakthrough came when Ethan finally confronted his mother. "I've been thinking about what you said at the event," he told me one evening. "And you're right. I've let them control us too much. That stops now." Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time, it felt like we were on the same team. Vivian and Lila didn't change overnight, of course. But they began to sense that their grip on Ethan, and me, was loosening. I stopped engaging with their drama, and Ethan started standing up for me in small but meaningful ways. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was progress. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. Vivian's control didn't dissipate easily. True to form, she staged one last attempt to reassert her dominance. She orchestrated a lavish gala under the guise of celebrating Ethan's business success, but used it as an opportunity to showcase her influence over her family. As the night unfolded, it became clear that I was the centerpiece of her unspoken narrative. She made subtle jabs about my career, my background, and even our marriage. Lila, ever her mother's loyal soldier, followed suit. But this time, I didn't crumble. "I have to hand it to you, Vivian," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You know how to command attention. But I think it's time we all stop pretending that your way is the only way." The room fell silent, the weight of my words settling over the crowd. Vivian's eyes narrowed, her composure slipping for just a moment before she recovered with a brittle smile. "I only want what's best for my son," she replied, her tone icy. "And so do I said. "But what's best for him, and for us, is to build a life on our terms, not yours." To my surprise and relief, Ethan stepped forward, his hand gently resting on my shoulder. "Kate's right," he said, his voice steady. "It's time I stop letting you dictate how we live our lives. I love you, Mom, but we're building something together, and we need space to do that." Vivian looked as though she'd been struck. For years, she had wielded her authority without question, and now her son, the one she'd always counted on, was drawing a line. The power dynamic shifted in that moment, and everyone in the room felt it. Life didn't transform overnight, but the changes were palpable. Vivian and Lila, while still formidable, no longer had the same hold over us. They tested boundaries occasionally, but Ethan and I held firm, presenting a united front. My career flourished as I took on bigger projects and found a supportive community of peers and mentors. Ethan, inspired by my independence, started exploring ways to step out of his mother's shadow in his own professional life. Our relationship grew stronger too. We learned to communicate better, to lean on each other rather than pulling away when things got tough. The challenges we had faced together became the foundation for something deeper and more resilient. Adam remained a trusted confidant, offering wisdom and humor when we needed it most. He even helped bridge the gap between us and Vivian, softening her sharp edges over time. "She'll never admit it," Adam told me one day, "but she respects you. You stood up to her in a way no one else ever has." It wasn't the kind of victory I had once imagined, there were no dramatic apologies or sudden transformations. But I had learned that true strength didn't come from forcing others to change. It came from staying true to myself, no matter the opposition. One afternoon, as I worked on a new design project in the home office Ethan and I had renovated together, I paused to take it all in. The sunlight streaming through the windows, the hum of Ethan's laughter from the next room as he played with our dog, the quiet peace of knowing I was exactly where I was meant to be. The journey had been messy, painful, and at times overwhelming. But it had also been worth it. I had found my voice, my purpose, and a love that was stronger for the trials it had endured. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving.